Well, hello, friends. We are happy that you are here with us for another episode of the SIP series On the Stir, brought to you by Gazelle Media. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin, and next to me, as always, is Debbie Baldwin, author, entertainment columnist, and sitcom producer, and our resident movie guru. Hello, Debbie.
Hey, Trish.
Okay, so Deb, guess what is just around the corner? Yes, Valentine's Day. And in anticipation of Valentine's Day, Debbie, our must-see movie list this week is all about romance, where some are sweet, some are really steamy, but all in all, definitely, I would say all of them are swoon worthy.
Yes. Now, in the romance novel world where I am currently immersed,
Yes, you are.
They have a thing called an HEA, which is a happy ever after, where romance novels always have to have that, kind of perfect ending.
All right.
And movies, not so much. I think this list has a good mix of some, kind of wedding topper endings and some with a little bit more of a question mark, but they're all very, very romantic.
I think so. And I think one of the big things that characterizes a lot of these movies is just that chemistry between the two lead roles, the leading man and the leading lady, or in other cases, leading man and leading man. It's just oozing off the screen, that chemistry.
Yes, absolutely. And it's, there have been a lot of very romantic movies that have failed because the co-stars lack that kind of spark that you really want to see. As an audience member, you can feel it in your seat.
You can feel it, you can see it, and you're not going to buy it if there's no chemistry at all.
Right.
All right. So what I found that was fascinating in preparing for today's program, that whatever was going on screen, what was going on behind the scenes was just as interesting.
I'm not sure I want to know.
No, they're actually good things, but it's one of those things where, maybe upon second viewing, third viewing of the film, some of these things are going to start to click. So without further ado, for our first movie, we are definitely setting you up, not just for romance, but adventure and definitely glamour. We're talking Cary Grant, we're talking Grace Kelly, we're talking the French Riviera, and we are taking you all the way back to 1955 and To Catch a Thief.
And this movie is a 10 out of 10. It's flawless, in my opinion. From the title, which comes from the famous phrase, set a thief to catch a thief, to the plot line, which Cary Grant plays a retired jewel thief who is living in a luxury villa on the French Riviera and is immediately a suspect when a rash of jewelry robberies take place. And he goes about trying to catch the thief to exonerate himself. And Grace Kelly is a socialite who is visiting the French Riviera with her mother. That character is absolutely priceless. And, I won't give away the farm on this, but it's just a great, great movie. Very fun, very entertaining. The romance between Grace Kelly and Cary Grant is spectacular. And this does have an HEA. I hope spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, but hey, oh my gosh.
And I have to just acknowledge that the line of the movie is, because Grace Kelly's character, I think her name's Danielle, has this overbearing mother. And at the very end of the movie, when she arrives at Cary Grant's villa in the south of France, the last line of the movie is, "Mother is going to love it up here." And Cary Grant's face just absolutely falls. And it's such a perfect note for the vibe of the movie, which is funny and fun and lighthearted, but also engaging and romantic.
Eye
So,
candy.
yeah,
Just
totally.
that eye candy
Everything.
alone will keep you busy, not just with the setting of the movie, but her outfits.
Oh my
Oh my
God.
goodness. Edith Head was the costumer, and of course, a legend in her own right. Oh my goodness, just the eye-popping fashions.
I mean, it's like a runway show, every scene. And Grace Kelly is, known for all, being a fashion icon of her time. And Rear Window certainly is another movie where she's in one fabulous outfit after the next. And this is between the settings and the jewelry and the clothing. It's just eye candy. You can't stop watching.
Sure. And you mentioned Rear Window. Also, there was Dial M for Murder. This is an Alfred Hitchcock film. Um, it is the last of 3 Hitchcock films with Grace Kelly. And, apparently Cary Grant himself has mentioned in several interviews that Grace Kelly was his all-time favorite leading lady. He was interviewed just months before his death, and he was quoted as saying, "I've worked with many fine actresses, as we know, but in my opinion, the best actress I ever worked with was Grace Kelly," he says. Ingrid, Audrey, Deborah Kerr were splendid actresses, but Grace was utterly relaxed, the most extraordinary actress ever. Just like her name, Grace.
I have to agree. His list of co-stars is impressive, to say the least.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're talking about Grant and Kelly, but this movie was also known for the romance that blossomed off screen right around the filming of this movie. So this was Grace Kelly's final movie before she retired from acting at the age of 26. It was around this time during the production of To Catch a Thief on the French Riviera that she met, guess who? Prince Rainier of Monaco. And following a long distance courtship, about a year later is when they had that fairy tale wedding. I mean, way before Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, we had this royal couple that just fascinated everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, it just makes me laugh to think she retired from acting at 26.
At age 26.
But yeah, and that obviously that romance and that wedding and
Yeah.
even the tragic ending, it captivated everyone across the globe.
Sure, sure. So just wanted our viewers to know that this movie, To Catch a Thief, is actually streaming for free right now on Pluto TV. So if you want to catch a really, really great classic, one of the great classics, it is now streaming for free on Pluto TV. So Deb, the next 2 movies, we're going to jump on over to 1987. So
What a great year for romance.
Oh my gosh. So the next 2 movies we're going to talk about were released the same year, 1987. One definitely steamier than the other. And we're talking PG-13 versus PG. So we'll begin with the PG-13 one because it was the one that was released first. This is the first, yes? Oh my God. Is that your version of the steamy? All right, so this is the first movie to sell more than 1 million copies on home video. And if Debbie's, come hither motions is not jarring your memory there, apparently I wasn't the only one, Deb, wanting to watch Johnny Castle dance over and over and over again. And we're talking about Dirty Dancing.
I mean, I remember when I saw it. I remember driving to the mall in New Jersey from college with my friends. I remember rewatching it 7,000 times. Nobody puts baby in a corner.
And still having the same reaction, no matter how many times you've seen it, screaming and swooning at the exact same spots of the movie. I don't know which one did it for you, but for me, is Johnny dancing down the center aisle there, coming up to the stage with whatever it was he was doing. Oh my gosh.
The lift, the iconic lift, which was absolutely brilliantly used in Crazy Stupid Love, if you remember,
Of
with
course.
Ryan Gosling. And So yeah, everyone seems to know that that moment was kind of the culmination of romantic cinema for that era, certainly.
Ah,
For me, it was, the two of them on the log doing the balancing act, or, when they were just rehearsing in that little thing I just did, come here, Johnny, when they mouth the lyrics to the
Love
song
is
that
strange.
they listen to, and which of course leads right into the soundtrack, which is one of the best of all time, no question.
Two of the best. Remember, the songs were so good and they couldn't pack it into one soundtrack. There was actually a Dirty Dancing Volume 2.
Oh my gosh.
So
I missed
yes.
that. Okay, good. Yeah.
So we were talking about the lift scene, another scene that was kind of iconic, not as iconic as the lift scene, but that tickle scene. Remember that tickle scene?
Yes.
Okay, so apparently these two did not get along well off screen. And Jennifer Grey has confirmed that. She had always said that, Patrick was fearless, I was fearful. So Patrick was ready, game to do anything. I was not willing to do anything. And so that was where they kind of butted heads. And that tickle scene was shot at the end of a very long day. Jennifer Grey reportedly was exhausted. And so she just kind of gave up on the scene and she just kept getting tickled and started laughing. And that shot of Johnny Castle, Patrick Swayze, being annoyed at her was actually his reaction because she just kept laughing. She couldn't get the take done. And that was a scene that they kept.
And, sometimes, and I mean, it's a shame that they didn't get along off camera, but that dynamic fits their characters perfectly. With Johnny Castle as this sort of daring, suave, more experienced, guy, and Frances Baby as the, more naive, fearful female. It's, I can see how that fueled the fire of the chemistry on screen.
I was going to say, it was one of those times where the tension between the two really worked to their advantage.
Yeah.
For this one, definitely. All right. So, Deb, I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but last year in 2020, a sequel to Dirty Dancing was announced, and Jennifer Grey reportedly will reprise her role as Baby. What do you say?
Yeah, I always say remake the crappy movies and make them good. Like take a great script or, that failed, or, I don't know, why mess with something that's so perfect in all of our hearts? It's just,
And I'm sorry, Dirty Dancing was Patrick Swayze.
100%. Yeah.
Yes.
And,
So
it's also kind of a moment in time. I mean, the film is set in the 50s, but it was released in the 80s, and it was just that kind of iconic film that everyone kind of remembers and loves, and when they futz with it, it just sort of deflates the balloon a little bit.
I am completely with you on that. So the original, the one that we all love, is now streaming on Hulu, HBO Max, and Amazon Prime. So FYI, if you want to relive those moments, that's where you can find Dirty Dancing. So the next film in 87, so Dirty Dancing was released in the summer. This next one from 87 was released in the fall, in October 1987. I think personally has one of the most swoon-worthy romantic lines of all time, and that is the line, "As you wish."
If you have not seen The Princess Bride, Trish and I will wait. Just go right now.
Go see it.
Go watch it. It is, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies of all time. It's based on a novel, and it starts off paying homage to its origin material, with Peter Falk playing a grandfather and Fred Savage the grandson
From Wonder Years.
and starts reading him the story of The Princess Bride, which stars Carrie Elway and Robin Wright before she married Sean Penn.
Yes.
And it's just a fairy tale with more talent in that cast from Mandy Patinkin, Billy Crystal, Chris Sarandon. I mean, Carol Kane. I can't, every time I pause, like Andre the Giant, Wallace Shawn, it's every single scene is so packed with comedy, and the dialogue is so clever, and the romance is so wonderful.
It is so sweet. It is so sweet.
It's a fantastic movie.
It's one of those films that even if you've seen it several times, you will find something new, or you will see something in a different light that will either make your heart swoon or make you laugh, you know, that you didn't get in past viewings. It's just a perfect little movie.
It really is. And I'm forever in our house when there's a scene when Fezzik the Giant, who's played by the great wrestler Andre the Giant, plays a little game where he rhymes with whatever someone has just said, and his sort of boss in the scene scolds him after he's annoyed him by doing it and says, "No more rhyming now, I mean it." And there's this big long pause, and Fezzik says, "Anybody want a peanut?" And like my friend group, and if anybody want a peanut, it was just always this kind of running joke. But yeah, it's, I mean, from Billy Crystal and Carol Kane as the married magicians.
Oh my gosh.
The six-fingered man. It's Mandy Patinkin. I mean, we can't not mention his performance as the vengeance-seeking, you know,
Indigo Montoya.
Comrade, and "You killed my father, prepare to die." I mean, we could start at the top and we'll just go through the dialogue of the whole movie.
No kidding. So this is one perfect, just picture perfect example of how two co-stars were so magnetically attracted to each other. Deb, off screen, these two apparently were just truly gaga over each other during filming. Robin Wright apparently had a huge crush on Cary Elwes, and the feeling was mutual because Cary Elwes, as you may know, wrote a book called As You Wish. And in his book, he says, "I cannot tell a lie. I fell in love with Robin from the moment we met," and that he couldn't concentrate on much of anything after that first encounter with Robin Wright. And then I just found it so cute and so funny. We're told that during the final scene that the two of them shot together, and I believe it was the one where they kiss on horseback. Robin and Cary were so reluctant to end their time together on screen that one or the other kept requesting retakes of the scene just so they could keep at it and keep going. So that was just, you know.
I mean, it's perfectly cast. Those two look like they should be a couple. I mean, they really are like two puzzle pieces that fit together.
So yes, put that at the top of your list. It is now streaming on Disney Plus, and you can find it at all the other streaming services, but it is on Disney Plus. I know that. So we're going to jump a couple years over to 1989. 1989, once again, find two now classic rom-coms going head to head. These two movies were released the same month that year, July of 1989. The first one that we're going to talk about made $21.5 million at the box office. Not really very much, but it's a film that's definitely made a lasting impression since then. And it's such a great film, and that is Say Anything.
Say Anything is another one of those just iconic. It's this, you know, everyone, when you think of that movie, you think of John Cusack holding the boombox over his head, blasting Peter Gabriel to Ione Skye's window. That movie, John Cusack, you know, he was seemed like he was sort of reluctantly dragged into romantic movies, from The Sure Thing to Say Anything, but man, is he an appealing leading man. Their chemistry is fantastic. His love for her from the get-go,
Oh,
Gobbler.
so palpable, so palpable.
the incredible cameos and supporting characters in that, from Jeremy Piven. I mean, people that went on to have huge careers. It's just a great romance. Very, very romantic movie. I mean,
Oh,
so
wow.
many scenes beyond the boombox scene, the scene on the beach, in the car, the Malibu is just like another character in that movie. But yeah, it's a great film.
All right, so you mentioned the scene in the car, and talk about a couple whose chemistry was just undeniable. Ione Skye has hinted that the off-screen chemistry between her and John Cusack was off the charts. Debbie, the day that they filmed that car scene when he was teaching her to drive a stick shift, she had said, if the two of them been unattached at the time, they would have ended up going home together. That's how things got really steamy during that day of that shoot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just every time I like think about that movie, I think of a different, the scene when she reappears after she's broken up with him and he's in the ring and he gets kicked in the face and knocked unconscious. I mean,
Oh,
oh my God, I got to go watch that movie right now.
oh my gosh, yes, yes. Say Anything, great movie. Another great movie from that same year, from that same month, July of 1989. It fared a little better at the box office, made 92.8 million, maybe perhaps due to the even bigger names on the marquee. And we are talking about Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah, and undeniably, When Harry Met Sally is one of the iconic romances of all time. I would say that it's not, if you take a movie like Say Anything, which kicks you in the gut with the romance, it's heart-wrenching. You are rooting for these two. Like there's a desperation there. When Harry Met Sally is a horse of another color. It's this long, drawn out romance relationship, enemies to lovers, or whatever you want to call it, enemies to friends to lovers, and the sort of 10-year span of these two and their relationship with other people, and then finally realizing that they're the others, the lid for their pot.
Yes.
And filled with fantastic comedy, just peppered throughout the story. And then the one thing that I think really elevates this film to romantic is these little sidebars that take place throughout the film of these real married couples telling the stories of their romances. And it just injects this extra layer of heartwarming romance to the story that really makes the film a great romance.
I think it definitely did, and it helps to make the point that the film was trying to make, was that, all couples are not alike, and
Right.
they go through a different journey to discovering each other. And everyone knows the premise of this movie, and it's that huge question where can men and women ever be just friends? And so I think that the film does a really good job of doing that. What I wasn't familiar with, Debbie, was that I knew that the screenplay was written by Nora Ephron, but what she did was she based the screenplay on a series of interviews that she did with director Rob Reiner, because Rob Reiner had just recently gotten divorced and he was living the single life and was really faced with a lot of these questions that Harry, who's modeled after, Harry was modeled after his life, his story, was faced with in the movie. So I just found that interesting, that it really was based on, something real that happened, and how that was.
And it does do a great job of exploring the notion, what if you're not compatible when you're 22, but you are compatible when you're 32? I mean, it's an interesting look at relationships from every angle. It's packed full of all kinds of relationships, from the Bruno Kirby, Carrie Fisher,
Yes.
the two best friends
Carrie
relationship
Fisher, yes,
to Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal's relationships with other people until they finally resolve the romance between the two of them.
I definitely thought the first time I saw this movie that this was a grown-up movie about falling in love and romance. If you compare it to Say Anything, which was more teenage angst, just two very different romances, but just both just very poignant and compelling, and definitely left an impression if you had seen those movies.
Definitely.
All right, our next movie comes from a screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan. If that name sounds familiar, he was the director of The Big Chill. Debbie, he had written this screenplay in the 1970s as a vehicle for Steve McQueen and Diana Ross, but was rejected at the time for being too controversial. And it wasn't until 1992 that the film came out, this time starring Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner, and that is The Bodyguard.
And I will spare you bursting into song and singing I Will Always Love You. I'm heeding the words of Simon Cowell on American Idol back in the day when he said to the contestants, never sing Celine Dion and never sing Whitney Houston because you'll never be able to top them.
He's probably right.
But when you say the name of the movie, The Bodyguard, the song I Will Always Love You immediately pops in your head.
And then after that, the entire soundtrack, because that entire soundtrack of Whitney Houston songs were just
Run to You, I Have Nothing.
Oh,
one after the next. And Whitney Houston, I mean, come on. Her acting was good, but the singing, come on.
The singing, my God. And we were talking about this prior to our show about, some of the really just defining scenes from this movie. I thought the one where Kevin Costner is sitting there in front of a huge video screen watching Whitney. Rachel Marin was her name, and he was Frank Farmer, the bodyguard, and just watching her intently as she just did her thing on video, I thought was so hot. And then you reminded me of that one scene where he goes and rescues her from the nightclub when mayhem ensued. And that was another one. There was another one you remember.
I mean, it's when you take the initial premise of the hot bodyguard and the vulnerable woman. I mean, it's a trope that you can roll your eyes if you want, but it's a cliche for a reason. It works. The damsel in distress. It's been a theme in romance for centuries. So, and it's interesting to me, The Bodyguard only got 33% positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Movie critics did not like this film. They did not think that Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston had chemistry. They, as you can imagine, thought it was, oh, come on. Audiences disagreed.
I think so. I think this is another case in which, the tension worked to their advantage. And Kevin Costner being subdued as Frank Farmer, I thought was just, it's his hottest role, I would have to say.
Kevin Costner, he's hit or miss. And as he has aged, he's certainly found a niche where he's fantastic. In his earlier roles, sometimes the role was too much for his range. But this film hit the nail on the head for him. Absolutely.
Definitely. The Bodyguard. Okay,
so and here's a little trivia for you.
Okay.
Remember the British guy Cy, who was
yes,
Rachel Marin's PR agent? Did you know that he was a member of the band Spandau Ballet? He's a musician. He's
saying true?
He's saying this much is true.
No way. Wow. Well, that's a revelation.
The music fans.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So one more thing about The Bodyguard, which was a revelation to me. So we were talking about this prior to the show, that iconic poster that they released for the movie of Frank Farmer kind of cradling Rachel as she was being rescued, carrying her off to safety. Okay, so Kevin Costner revealed years later that the woman in the poster was not Whitney Houston. It was her body double, because they took the photos after a long day of production, and Whitney had already gone home, and then they decided to just go ahead and take the photos, get it over with. And so that was actually, according to Kevin Costner, Whitney's body double.
All right. Well,
I know.
doesn't diminish the movie in my eyes.
No, it doesn't at all. But, you know, it was one of those things, really?
Yeah.
But whatever. Okay, so we're going to move on to 1999. And this was a film that, you know, it really was considered a breakthrough film for a lot of its supporting cast members. And that is the film The Best Man.
Now, this film, you mentioned Lawrence Kasdan and The Big Chill earlier. This film has a very Big Chill vibe to it for me.
Yes.
Taye Diggs plays an up-and-coming novelist who returns to his friend group for one of their weddings. And it's an ensemble cast, and, you know, someone's hooked up in college, and someone's, you know,
yes, you're right. Yes,
unrequited love for someone else. And the cast includes Terrence Howard and Morris Chestnut, Nia Long, and this all takes place during the course of this wedding weekend. And this Taye Diggs' character has written a book called Unfinished Business, which is a memoir about this friend group. So it's this intersection of this book and people discovering truths they had not known before, and people rekindling relationships, finding new relationships. But it's very sexy and romantic, and again, another eye candy movie, because there's lots of attractive people to look at.
All right, so we were talking about some of the supporting cast for this movie, and we mentioned Terrence Howard, who, of course, from this movie, in hindsight, it really has been considered by a lot of people as his breakout role. And, you know, from then he moves on and stars in Hustle and Flow, in which he was nominated for an Academy Award. And of course, after that, probably even bigger household name when he starred in Empire. That was a hits TV show.
Yeah, he was in one of the Iron Man movies. I mean, his career has skyrocketed since, for sure.
Definitely one of the more versatile actors out there. Okay, so we are going to move on to 2005. And I have to say, this one is considered one of the most romantic, perhaps most endearing of Jane Austen's classics. And it is Pride and Prejudice.
And there are a lot of versions of this, and people have very strong opinions on which version they like better. There's the BBC version, which I think stars Colin Firth. This is my preference, the 2005 Matthew McFadden and Keira Knightley version, but take your pick. There's lots to choose from, and they're all really good because the source material
is top notch. Yes.
So, you know, the Jane Austen novel, and maybe read the book because it's just as good. But it's the story of a girl in a family struggling the father, played by Donald Sutherland, with his 5 daughters, is working hard to make financially successful matches for his daughters. And Keira Knightley's character, Elizabeth Bennet, who, you know, famously encounters Matthew McFadden's character, Mr. Darcy. And their initial dislike of one another. Mr. Darcy is a troubled, difficult, brooding man, and Keira Knightley is a smart, outspoken young lady, and they are each other's perfect match. And it just takes them a little while to realize what we, the reader or the viewer, know from the get-go.
Yes, and I thought this was a well-made film. I have to decide between this and the PBS version because I'm a huge Colin Firth fan, but this one was really well done.
I have to say, Matthew McFadden, I thought was perfect in this role. He was an unknown to me. I'd never seen him on film before. And I thought he made a perfect Mr. Darcy. Now it's interesting. I saw this film in the theater, and there was a final scene where they are in bed together. I swear to God, but people think I'm making this up. I'm like, maybe I imagined it, like I had a dream that night or something. But there was a little tiny kind of closing scene where Mr. Darcy is out on the grounds, and he walks back into the house, and she's in the bed, and he kind of like goes towards her, and then the credits roll. And I did read somewhere that was considered like not an alternate ending, but an added scene that I guess is available in like the director's cut, but is not
Yes,
in
that's
the
what it was. It was
standard
either
film.
that, I had heard that, or the ending was different for American audiences versus European. Something
Okay,
like
maybe
that.
that's what
That
it is.
there
Yeah.
were two endings. And you mentioned, Matthew McFadden, and this did not click with me, but he is the guy in one of our favorite shows, Deb, Succession. He plays
Oh, right.
he plays Tom Wamgans, who is Shiv's
Yep, absolutely.
husband,
That's great. Yes, that's absolutely right.
which is like two completely different roles that, you had to make the connection, because I've seen that name before. And
Yeah.
now he's an even bigger American star. Before he was just, on the other side of the pond. But now with the success of Succession being, the show of the year, Emmy award winning show, I mean, he's an even bigger deal here now.
Yeah, and talk about range. I mean, the fact that, we wouldn't even put two and two together right away, that's a sign
Yes.
of a real talent,
Yes, yes. Yeah, it was just that name that stuck with me. And I
Yeah.
said, I've seen this man before. And so that is Pride and Prejudice. It is streaming right now on Peacock, Hulu, among other streaming services. So
And we
definitely.
have to talk about really quickly the romance of Pride and Prejudice is heart stopping when the two of them come to that realization that they're in love with each other. And Matthew McFadden, Mr. Darcy, walking across that field to find her. You're in the audience yelling like, run, like you cannot wait for that explosion of those two characters coming together. So yes, it is spectacularly romantic.
But it worked. It filled you with anticipation.
Yes, absolutely.
Genius scene. All right. So our next film is from 2013. And I have to say, I enjoyed watching this movie. I saw it maybe about a year or so ago. And it is the movie About Time, starring Rachel McAdams, Domhnall Gleeson, and Bill Nighy.
And I'm so glad that this is on my list because it's one that maybe people have not seen.
Yes.
It is this bizarre British time travel romance. And what it is the Domhnall Gleeson character is a young man who's a little lost. And one day his father explains to him that the men in their family have always been able to go back in time to right a wrong or correct a mistake or whatever. And it's sort of Groundhog Day meets, I can't even think of a good romance meets Say Anything or whatever.
Yeah.
And the first time he does it, I love that whole scenario with he has this huge crush on this woman, and she said, and he tells her like right before she's about to leave at the end of the summer, and she says, oh, I wish you'd said something sooner. So he time travels back to the beginning of the summer, and he tells her
something sooner.
oh, I wish you'd waited. So he's learned, slowly but surely that sometimes there's nothing that can be done. And but he meets Rachel McAdams and kind of, finagles time to make their love story happen. And then there's this incredibly poignant relationship with Bill Nighy, who plays his father.
I love him. Yeah.
And people know him from
Love Actually.
Love Actually.
He was the aging rock musician,
Yes.
Billy Mack,
And,
I think was his name.
yes, and he plays Domhnall Gleeson's father in this film and kind of guides him in life. And it's a great father-son relationship movie as well as a great romantic comedy. So
No question about that. I think, like you said, it is kind of like Groundhog Day, but whereas Groundhog Day was more comedy, this
yeah,
one has some comedy, some romance, but it also has that poignancy
yes,
with the themes that were running through the movie.
yes. And there's, certain rules about the time travel that impact the lives of the people around the main character. And boy, I mean, there's a lot in this film.
It
There's
really tugs at you. I think that it's one of those movies that after you see it, it kind of forces you to take stock of what's been going on in your life, because it also makes a point about, spending quality time with the people you love. I
absolutely.
mean, it's got everything in it. And again, like you said, not that many people have seen this movie, but you really should see this
Yes,
movie.
About Time it's called, and it's great.
Yes, and About Time is available on Netflix right now. And just an aside, this is one of a couple of films in which Rachel McAdams stars as the partner of a time traveler. So don't confuse this with The Time Traveler's Wife, which is something completely different. And then also, one of the movies that we really love, Deb, is Midnight in Paris, which kind of has that element as
Uh-huh.
well. This one is, stands on its own. And again, that is the movie About Time. Okay, so we're going to move on to 2017. Gosh, what can you say about this movie? It's set in rural northern Italy, which really contributed to the beauty and the romance of this film. In Italian, the title would translate to Chiamami col tuo nome, and that is Call Me by Your Name.
Oh, Trish.
Yeah, I know.
Stop.
I thought I'd throw that in to even heighten the whatever.
And this is, normally I am much more into that kind of romance. Boy meets girl, boy meets boy, whatever. People meet, fall in love, and have a happy ending. This is not that film. This is a moment in time film, romance. And it's beautiful. And while it's not my favorite kind of romance, this is one of my favorite movies because it's so complex. Of course, there is the sexual orientation component where the two main characters in this film are men who have the romance, and but also have relationships with women separately. So there's a deep complexity going on, a lot of conflict, a lot of understanding your true self, um, seizing a moment and getting the most out of it, maybe knowing all along that it won't last forever.
That it was going to be fleeting, which is part of what's so bittersweet about this movie.
Yeah.
And, we're talking, and the acting was just so exceptional, from the lead actors on to the supporting characters. This movie, as we said, it's a love affair between two men, 17-year-old Elio and 24-year-old graduate student Oliver, who was working as a grad student for Elio's father.
Yes, played by Timothy Chalamet plays the younger man. Armie Hammer plays the older 24.
Yes.
And yeah, so it's this, and their attraction and consummation of that attraction and how it all plays out in the end is just it's really Timothy Chalamet's story.
Yes.
It's his coming of age tale, and it's heartbreaking and beautiful, and it's really and the setting, everything about this movie is beautiful to look at.
Oh my goodness, yes. And, we talk about this a lot in this podcast about how most movies, for the most part, are not shot chronologically because of budget, because of scheduling, just logistics.
Right.
This was an exception because it was shot in chronological order. And the reasoning behind that was that, they wanted the audience to actually witness the on-screen maturity of these two characters as they discovered one another and as they got to know each other. And so, of course, it would make sense that the more time that these two actors spent together, the more comfortable they get with each other. And you see that progression as somebody who's watching it on screen.
Yeah, and that is a very expensive way to shoot a movie.
Yes.
As you can imagine, you say like, okay, we have 3 scenes that take place in a restaurant. So the studio rents out the restaurant and they shoot all 3 scenes back to back in one day,
Exactly.
rather than, go back and rent out the restaurant again to shoot the scene when it comes up in the actual script. So it's a costly way to shoot a film, but I'm sure for the actor's benefit, it was great.
Yes, yes. It definitely was worth it for this movie. What an unforgettable film. Okay, so we have reached the end of our list. Our final film is not only one of the most romantic movies of all time, but really one of the most loved movies and among the greatest films ever made. And we are taking you all the way back to 1942, and I'm sure you've guessed it already. It hasn't made an appearance on the list yet, and it is Casablanca.
Casablanca. Yeah, I mean, Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman. I mean, it's an unforgettable love story set in Casablanca, Morocco during World War II. Ingrid Bergman is the lover of the head of the Czech resistance. She had a steamy relationship with the Humphrey Bogart character, Rick. And they cross paths again in Casablanca. And it's this story of, love and sacrifice and the greater good. And the movie is perfection. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it.
There is nothing to say. I mean,
We're done.
I know we're clapped. Now you just say the title, and immediately all those scenes go through your head. Not just all those scenes, Deb. This is probably the movie that wins in terms of the best top movie quotes of all time, because it's like every line.
Now,
Something.
Did you know Humphrey Bogart never says "Play it again, Sam"?
Nor does Bergman
in the movie. It's never spoken. He says, "Play it, Sam. Play as time goes by" once.
Yes.
But that's the only time. So play it again. There are a lot of times we should do a podcast on bastardized movie roles. There's a bunch of it.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah. So the line actually, like you said, "Play it again, Sam. Play as time goes by," which has evolved into "Play it again, Sam." And all the other quotes that are worth mentioning. Here's looking at you, kid.
Here's looking at you, kid. We'll always have Paris.
We'll always have Paris. Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Round up the usual suspects.
Which I forgot was in this movie. Round up the usual suspects. And of course, of all the gin joints and all the towns in all the world, you walk into mine. She walks into mine. Yeah.
I mean, what a script, my God, to have all those lines of dialogue that are so recognizable, written by one person for one film. It's amazing.
Yes. And so back then it won the Oscar for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. Humphrey Bogart was nominated for Best Actor, but did not win. It didn't matter. He was just a huge, huge star then. During the Oscars, for when Casablanca came up, he and his wife were mobbed as they were getting out of the limo. And it took about a dozen police officers to separate them from the crowd. So that was how huge of a star he was. Imagine being mobbed. That doesn't happen anymore because everything is so, But back then, my goodness. Another thing that I found interesting, Ingrid Bergman was 2 inches taller than her co-star Deb. And so he reportedly had to either stand on boxes or bricks or wear lifts. And when they were seated, he was sitting on cushions.
And
Movie magic.
you know who else? What other famous pairing for another romantic movie where that was the case is Richard Gere and Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. He has to stand on a box in a lot of scenes and actually jokes in the film that she is very tall.
Yes.
But yeah, these short actors in Hollywood just stand on step stools.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Hillary
So
cars.
back then, when this film came out, the New York Times reviewed the film and called it a film that, quote, makes the spine tingle and the heart take a leap. And it's just goes to show how enduring this film is, because when you see it in this day and age, it still does that. It still does that. And so this film is so solidly ensconced in Hollywood film legend that it's one of those films that is deemed untouchable. So Deb, did you hear about this? What happened 15 years ago?
Does it have to do with Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez?
No, it
Okay.
had to do with Madonna.
Oh,
Madonna.
I do know what you're talking about.
Yes, 15 years ago, thought it would be a good idea to remake the film, starring her, of course, as Ilsa and Ashton Kutcher as Rick. And well, of course, the plan, yes, it's funny. It's a funny thought. The plan was rejected. Oh,
I can't.
oh,
I cannot.
just yes. But yeah, you don't touch a film like Casablanca. You do not.
And you don't put Madonna and Ashton Kutcher as co-stars in anything other than maybe a grandmother and a grandchild. I mean,
that was her idea.
That's insane. And I do know that when Bennifer was a thing, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez were engaged and they made Gigli. Remember that hideous film? That they were kicking around the idea of remaking Casablanca with the two of them. Yes. So now you can get up and leave.
I am trying to control what without trying not to eye roll and do all the other stuff. Oh my gosh.
These big stars, they don't get where they are without having a tremendous amount of very high opinion of themselves. So I guess it's not that surprising that big stars would say, I want to cast myself in Casablanca and remake it, but come on.
But to us watching from the outside, that is the most ridiculous, ludicrous thing I have ever heard.
Yeah.
Either one. Either one. I mean, we're talking about
anyone. Really?
Yeah. I mean, we're already talking about you don't remake 30
most talented actors you can imagine, and say, I want to remake Casablanca with Edward Norton and I'm trying to think of who.
Charlize Theron.
And Charlize Theron. Wow, that might be really good.
You may be able to something.
No, God.
No.
I might go see that. Anyway, leave it alone. It's perfect.
Leave it alone. Leave it alone. All right. So that is the end of our list. To wrap this all up in a pretty little package, our signature sweet treat this week will definitely make you swoon, Deb. We are making red velvet cheesecake brownies. Yeah. And to kick it up a notch, we are making them heart-shaped for Valentine's.
Aww.
And so it makes for a really pretty presentation, perfect as a Valentine's Day gift for your special someone. And, literally, truly from the heart, homemade and made with love.
That sounds delicious.
Yes, it is. And we will have that recipe for you on gazellemagazine.com. And before we say goodbye, Deb, the new book is doing really well. Speaking of steamy romance, Debbie's follow-up novel, Illicit Intent. There you go. There's the book cover. It is now out and available on all at all online booksellers. So congratulations, Deb.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's doing great. The reviews have been blowing me away. I'm very flattered, and I'm just happy people seem to be enjoying it. I had so much fun writing it. Like researching how to like steal a painting, for example, is really fascinating. So
Oh, it's very intriguing.
yeah, it's great that the readers are enjoying it.
All right. So, Illicit Intent, again, you can find the book at all online booksellers. And so, another reminder, you can be among the first to know when a new episode of the SIP series drops. All you have to do is click on the Gazelle icon on your screen to subscribe to our channel for free. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Debbie. And yes,
Happy Valentine's Day.
To see you next time. Happy Valentine's Day.